I came home from my sister's birthday dinner to find my key didn't work anymore. I stood on my own porch in the cold, turning the same key I'd used for 11 years, and it wouldn't open the door. My daughter-in-law, Priya, opened it instead, from the inside. She looked at me the way you'd look at a stranger asking for change. "We changed the locks," she said. "You don't live here anymore." I'm Margaret. I'm 61. That house wasn't Ryan's house. It wasn't Priya's house. It was mine, bought with my late husband, paid off with 30 years of double shifts at the hospital, and I'd let Ryan and Priya move in temporarily 2 years ago after Priya lost her job. Temporary had quietly become permanent. Ryan came to the door behind her, wouldn't look me in the eye. "Mom, we think it's better this way. You've been difficult since Dad died. Priya thinks it's healthier if you have your own space." Healthier? As if changing my own locks was a wellness plan. I didn't scream. I didn't cry on that porch, though God knows I wanted to. I just asked one question. "Where exactly do you think I'm supposed to go tonight?" Priya shrugged. "That's not really our problem anymore." That sentence is the one I remember most. Not really our problem. As if I was a tenant they were evicting, instead of the woman whose name was on every mortgage payment for 30 decades. I got back in my car. I sat in the driveway of the house I'd raised Ryan in, engine running, heater on, and I called the only person who'd know exactly what to do. My late husband's attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Diane Ferris, who'd handled our estate planning years ago. She picked up on the second ring, heard maybe 30 seconds of what happened, and went completely quiet. "Margaret," she finally said, "did they actually think they could lock you out of a house that isn't in Ryan's name?" I froze. "What do you mean, isn't in his name? He's lived there 2 years." "Living somewhere and owning it are two very different things," Diane said. "Margaret, the deed was never transferred. Ryan doesn't own that house. You do. Every bit of it. Which means what they just did tonight? They didn't evict a house guest." She paused. "They just illegally locked the actual homeowner out of her own property, and that's the kind of mistake that doesn't just cost them the house." I sat there in the dark, hands still shaking on the wheel, and for the first time all night, I almost smiled. I didn't sleep in my car that night. Diane insisted I stay at her guest room instead, and over coffee at 11 p.m., she pulled up my file. My husband Walter and I had bought that house together in 1994. When he passed 3 years ago, everything transferred to me automatically. Sole ownership, clean and simple. Ryan had never been added to the deed, not once. "Then why does he act like it's his?" I asked. Diane shrugged. "Because you let him live there for free, pay no rent, and never corrected him. People start believing what they're allowed to believe." The next morning, I learned exactly how far that belief had gone. Diane pulled records showing Ryan and Priya had been quietly improving the house for months. New kitchen countertops, a finished basement, a listing photographer who'd come by 2 weeks earlier. I stared at the photographer's invoice. Why would they need listing photos? Diane's face told me before she said it. "Margaret, I think they were preparing to sell it." My stomach dropped. Not rent it, not live in it forever. Sell it. Under my roof, using my house, planning to cash out an asset that was never theirs to begin with, and lock me out before I could ask questions? That afternoon, Priya texted me. Not an apology, a demand. She wanted me to sign a quit-claim form giving up any interest in the property so they could, quote, "move forward without complications." I laughed out loud reading it. They didn't even know I owned the house outright. They thought I was some kind of co-tenant standing in their way. I didn't respond to Priya. I let Diane respond for me, with a formal notice. It stated plainly that Margaret Whitfield was the sole legal owner of the property, that Ryan and Priya's occupancy had been at her discretion and could be revoked, and that changing the locks on a homeowner constituted an illegal lockout under state law. Ryan called 4 times within the hour. I let it ring. On the 5th call, I answered. "Mom, this is insane. It's basically your house, too." "It's not basically mine, it's entirely mine. It always was." Silence. Then Priya grabbed the phone. "You're really going to do this to your own son? Throw us out?" I thought about the porch, the cold. Not really our problem anymore. "I'm not throwing anyone out tonight," I said calmly. "I'm giving you 30 days to find somewhere else to live, which is 30 days more than you gave me." Priya's voice cracked with fury. "You can't prove any of this." "Actually," Diane said, taking the phone from me, "she can, and she just did." That evening, a process server arrived at the house I'd built a life in, not to remove me, but to formally notify my own son and his wife that the eviction clock had started. And somewhere in that house, sitting in the kitchen I'd once cooked 10,000 dinners in, Ryan was finally starting to realize. The 30 days passed slower than any month of my life. Ryan tried calling almost daily, alternating between guilt trips and outright anger. Priya stopped speaking to me entirely, communicating only through short, clipped texts about logistics. Neither of them ever said the word I kept waiting for. Sorry. On day 28, Ryan finally came to Diane's office alone, no Priya. He sat across from me, looking smaller than I remembered, like the years between us had suddenly caught up to him. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it," he said. "I didn't think you'd change the locks on your own mother," I said. "We're both learning things about each other." He rubbed his face. "Priya said it would be easier, that you'd fight less if it was already done. I let her talk me into it because, honestly, it was easier than standing up to either of you." That was the most honest thing he'd said in 2 years. I told him the truth, plainly. I wasn't doing this to destroy him. I was doing it because somewhere along the way, he and Priya had stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as an obstacle between them and an asset. And the moment they locked that door, they told me exactly how they saw me. "So what happens now?" he asked quietly. I laid it out. The house would go back to being mine, fully on paper and in practice. Ryan and Priya would move out by the deadline, but I wasn't cutting him off completely. I told him I'd help with a security deposit on an apartment because he was still my son, and love doesn't evaporate just because trust does. What I would not do was hand over a deed, sign a quitclaim, or pretend the last 2 years hadn't happened. Priya never apologized. She and Ryan moved into a rental across town, and their marriage, already strained by money and blame, grew rockier without a free house holding them together. I heard secondhand that they separated for a few months before working things out on their own terms, away from my property entirely. I sold the listing photos idea myself